laundry,
GTL,
gym tan laundry,
yep,
job, commute, good exercise, healthy salad, early to bed. Oh my goodness. All right. We are going to get started in just a little bit.
Setting up.
We are
Level's good. I think it sounds good.
¿Qué tiempo es?
11 o'clock.
It's 11 o'clock. All right.
Here we are.
Well, today we're going to try a call-in show. So test out this comedic idea you have. You're going to pull up your phone and hold it next to the microphone.
That's right.
That's your game plan.
We're going to try it out. It might not work. Let's see. But right now we haven't invested in this this mixer board. What's it called? The Rodecaster.
Yeah.
Promises great capabilities.
Promises a great podcast.
Including call-in capabilities. $600.
All right. Let's do this. What I wanted to do is Mark Brenwall. He's been on the TMBA podcast 3 times, and one of my favorite all-time guests. He'll be calling in. He started a thread in the Dynamite Circle forum as a response to our ranty episode about the fire community last week. And then there was a discussion in the Dynamite Circle with some thoughtful ideas, and I wanted to share some of the most thoughtful ideas about the markets, investing in finances in downturn. And then we want to clarify some things and also get Mark's perspective on it. That's the game plan for today. So let's get rolling. One of the things that a handful of the members said, and I'm not going to quote the actual member. I'm just going to quote the idea for sake of privacy. It's always fun to listen to Danity and go off, but the number of false dichotomies, willful or genuine misrepresentations, and generalizations thrown around means that it's not worth much more than entertainment. This comment, I think, is so true.
Sounds like us.
Yeah, I mean, it's really true that if, like, when you're doing a live show every day, just kind of, I'll explain, like, emotionally how I was feeling and why I made a lot of generalizations and stuff. So I'll get to that, but I just think that that's fair feedback. Like, I didn't sit down for a week and like think through my zombie portfolio, for example, which would have perhaps been a lot more useful. Another member wrote, the whole concept of, quote, investing in index funds is a marketing campaign designed by Wall Street to convince people to stash their savings in the markets instead of having any actual savings. On the one hand, this can become a very religious argument. People can read a statement like that and they can say, oh, that's a bit extreme. But I actually, I guess this represents my camp or my religion. I read a statement like that and I think that's not extreme at all. Like, that's actually what it is. And there might be a lot of positive things about it. It might be the greatest investment vehicle ever created, investment product, investment forum. And it might have a very solid historical record. And it also might have a very strong public support. Say, like, 99 out of 100 people in America believe that the stock market is a really safe, wonderful investment. First off, as an entrepreneur, I'm kind of like, okay, if 99 out of 100 believe in it, maybe there's an opportunity to do something different, or maybe the returns aren't so great. But anyway, I do agree fundamentally that this idea that you're investing in things, that word is used pretty loosely when what you're doing is essentially buying a product. Okay, there's another quote here I pulled out. If you take a step back, the argument is thus. The committee is, and this is the committee that creates the S&P 500, decides what companies are on it, and then weights them. So, for example, the example this poster gave was that Apple is 4% of the S&P 500's value. Like, it tracks with Apple by 4% correlation. This committee is, well, the be-all and end-all. They have the answer to your quest for market returns. Just follow them. To me, this simply makes no sense. Again, this is a religious conversation. No one can ultimately be right or wrong, which is, I think, it's so easy to have opinions. But this poster is tapping into some fundamental emotion that I have, which is like, I don't know who this committee is. I don't know how they're deciding things. And yeah, I know that they've been responsible historically. but so have a lot of other industries that don't exist anymore. And one other comment, observation number one, most people can't do it the TMBA way. And I think that's true. It's harder emotionally and intellectually to start a small cash generating asset, particularly one that doesn't take a lot of your time. It's going to take a lot of your time pretty much any way you cut it in the early years. And then observation number two, pure FIRE, financial independence, retire early, is mostly theoretical. And I think that that's what's so wonderful about it, and also what can be so dangerous about it. So I want to explain myself just a little bit. The reason that I was tossing around generalizations and lots of emotion, and it was kind of like a, rambunctious uncle at Thanksgiving has a couple glasses of wine and gets angry at someone who slighted him and goes off on it. And I did feel that emotion, and it's specifically this. For years, Mr. Money Mustache has been advocating that, like, the way he talks makes the tone of his articles is almost like this brash, like, put everything in the S&P 500, put everything in index funds. I'm like, you should do it. I'm doing it. It's super safe. And the tone is like this kind of like high, airy confidence. Like, you're kind of not seeing the point if you don't do this, right? That's the kind of tone. And I think it's irresponsible. I think it's bad and dangerous advice. And when I read an article when the exact thing that I was concerned about, oh my gosh, like, these people, they're losing their jobs, they're losing 30% of their retirement overnight. This is exactly why I was worried about this advice. And then he doubles down and comes with even more confidence. And while he could be right, it just made me mad that, like, man, like, this is not the moment to, like, cling to this theory that was dangerous in the first place. This is the moment to re-examine how you got in this position. And like one poster in the forum said, this purely theoretical thing, and I won't quote the person's name. I'd love to talk to him again on the podcast sometime. But he said, look, like, I'm paraphrasing, but he said, I don't meet people that are, like, retired young because of FIRE. I meet people in our community who are retired young. And that was another one of my points, is like, look at the actual cheddar here. Like, who's actually retired early? And so that's particularly the reason I went off that way, is I was angry at that article that we talked about at the top. And I realized, like, that's not a good way to be a podcaster, is just to be angry at something that most people haven't read and don't care about, randomly. So that's one thing. The other point that I really disagree with the FIRE community theoretically is what you ought to be doing with your time. And the FIRE community really believes that you should invest it in a job and take all of your savings and then invest it in the market. And what I feel is a smarter investment is to invest in yourself and to risk some cash in the early days to learn the entrepreneurial skill set, even if it's not some big complex business, even if it's something as simple as buying and trading collectibles or anything that teaches you the value of a dollar. That, to me, is what we call step 4. We all agree on the first 3 steps, like reduce your spending, save your income, make wise investments. And, for me, a wise investment is one that is always hedged. And it's always one that doesn't expose you to financial ruin. So this idea that you would just take every penny that you've ever earned and put it in a safe investment, that's a decent idea in theory, but it exposes you to ruin. It exposes you to one small thing happening that potentially creates a ruinous financial situation for you. And that's why I think it's dangerous. So yeah, the stock market's fine. It's relatively safe. All that stuff's good. But that doesn't mean you should put 100% of every single dollar that you've ever made. All I'm basically saying is diversify in a very long way. And so that's why I got so angry, is this idea of this leader stepping up and saying, in a moment when the New York Times basically comes out and says, these ideas are proving suspect. A lot of people are genuinely worried here. And what's his response is, like, to come back over the top and say, nope, I'm going to be right. You should keep doing this. And I genuinely hope he's right. I do think it would be worth just putting a little salt next to that sugar, though, and saying there's ways, there's other strategies that make a ton of sense here.
And there's ways that it can go wrong too.
Yeah. Okay. So that's my piece. I said my piece. It's 11:10.
You've said your piece. I'm going to call Mr. Brenwell because he's the one that started this thread, and we're going to try this out here live on the show. And you're going to laugh at me if it doesn't work because you told me it wouldn't work.
Tell us, guys, if what do you think of the call-in format? If you like it, we might get Bossman to invest a couple $100 here to get us a little board where we can have people buzz in.
Let me call Mark here and see if this is going to work.
All right.
Mark, are you there?
I'm ready when you are.
Oh my gosh. He's there.
He's there. Can you guys hear him?
Hello. How's everybody doing?
Let us know in the comments if you can hear Mark. If not, we'll have to figure out another way to do this.
I know. Like it's super hokey. I love it.
Yes, I can hear him. Thank you, Taylor.
Let's patchwork it in there. I love it.
This is awesome. Mark, thank you so much. This is a call-in show now.
It's a call-in show.
You are the first caller in.
It's so legit. I love it.
Very cool. I know it looks ridiculous. Have you been watching the live stream since we started it 10 minutes ago?
Yeah,
cool.
I have.
Okay, so you heard Dan's thoughts and Dan's apologies about the way that he came across, but then you started this thread, and I want to hear a little bit more about why you started this thread and some of your thoughts on this idea.
Yes. I like the topic, right? I mean, I understand why Dan gets so worked up about it. Dan is the spokesperson for the entrepreneurial movement, just like Mr. Money Mustache is the spokesperson for the FIRE movement, right? So, great. Both of you get your chance to lead the band here. But my reaction to the whole thing was just that, these people are thinking different, right? Which is how I started the topic, which is I like the fact that these people, these FIRE people are thinking different. They're thinking for them. I won't say necessarily generally thinking for themselves, but they're thinking different than go to college, get a job, get married, have 3 kids, get a house you can't afford, buy 3 cars you can't afford, take vacations you can't afford, right? And so when I hear Dan kind of ripping it apart, part of me is like, no, those are our people. Yeah, maybe they're a little bit our cousins and not our brothers and sisters, but they're different thinkers. I like people who do things like, do the van life or live in a tiny house or are minimalists, right? Just something that is not like, let me just mortgage my whole future for the rest of my life. And that was really why I started and said, hey, do we really hate these guys, or is there more to be learned from it?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's like the idea that you're going to get more angry at someone close to you when they're disappointing you than if they're just some rando walking down the street. It's part of me that does see them as so very close to what we're doing, and that's why I've spent a lot of time over the past few years trying to make this point number 4 argument, that the fact that so many of these people do start blogs isn't a defect, that's a feature.
Right.
And yeah.
And Mark, one of the other things that you said is thinking differently. And one of the questions I want to pose, and maybe you have the answer to this or maybe you don't, but a lot of what the FIRE community is predicated on is lowering your expenses. A lot of things that TMBA does, right? Lowering your expenses, and trying to write yourself a little bit of a different script than what's been written the last, I'd say, 20 years. But it doesn't actually, for me, it actually doesn't look that different than a responsible goody two shoes typical American, which is basically you do good in school, you get an education, you get a great job, you don't get into debt, you save as much as you can, and then you retire. I mean, so part of me thinks that this movement is actually very uninteresting and actually very typical American, before Americans got super invested in being, super consumers, basically. So is this movement actually something that's innovative or different than what most Americans traditionally have done?
Well, I mean, I think it's a good point. and I think what you're saying is like my grandfather. You know, I was born in '71. My grandfather lived a life like that, right, where there weren't these financial vehicles to, you know, mortgage yourself to the hilt back then. People bought houses for cash, you know, and so yeah, maybe it isn't a new movement, but it is for these people, right? It is a whole, like, you know, instead of the, you know, when I was in college, the thing was like the McMansion, right? The thing was really like, you know, money was cheap. Let's get as much as we can and let's look like we're really successful, and then just, you know, be chewing our nails, hoping that we can make this thing work in the next 10 years. And I think that whole thought process has really put people in a lot of pain. And so if this is maybe a regurgitation of what my grandfather did, great. I just think it's better than what we have been doing for so long.
I agree with you 100%, and agree on you on the distant cousin thing as well. You know, these are people that are thinking outside of the box and willing to accept a different script. You know, somebody in the forum responded to your post, and I was just curious if you had some thoughts on it. But basically, the idea is that you know, starting these TMBA style businesses or starting a small business. Mark, you have a very successful Amazon business. It's number one, it's difficult to do. But number two, we don't always have ideas for how to reinvest our profits. Meaning,
Yes.
These businesses, they take a lot of time and attention, and you know, we'll throw a lot of money back into them to keep the cash generating machine going. Now, in cases like maybe you're in, and we've been in the past, and a lot of people in the forums, it's possible that you have excess cash, and you have to figure out a way to deploy that. Or you don't. Some people just don't. I don't, you know, until I see the perfect opportunity. But a lot of people want to get that money working for them in a way that they don't have to actually work, because these businesses are a lot of, you know, input. And so they just put it into the market because they figure, you know what, I don't have to work at it. Index fund's going to return a couple %. Great. What's your thoughts on that? Are you doing any of that type of investing?
Oh, that's exactly where I'm at, to be honest. I mean, it's a luxury problem, right? Having this asset that turns out money, especially in the time we're in right now. You know, I'm super duper fortunate to have a product on Amazon that people want to use in their homes during being locked in. But yes, you know, in the last 8 or 9 months, I've had that extra cash, and what have I been doing with it? But putting it in index funds. Right now, fortunately for me, it's only been the last 8 months, so you know, it's not my whole future is in there. But that was my process. It's like, you know, I was thinking about how do I spend my time, right? And do I take this money and buy another cash generating asset, which does eat into my time, right? Or do I do something that is sort of, you know, quote unquote safe, and it doesn't take my time, which is just put it in the market and let it work for itself. Now, you know, I still hope I'm still young enough where I feel like that's still going to pay off. I think I'm a little bit more hopeful in the market returning than some of the people in the forum. You know, at the moment, obviously, I'm not continuing to invest, although maybe that's a mistake. I mean, the thing is, like, I'm not that sophisticated of an investor. I'm a pretty okay business owner and manager, but I don't really know what is the right thing to do with the extra cash, right? And so I have been trickling it into the market, and what I'm going to do from here on out, I really can't say.
Yeah, it makes sense. This stuff is difficult, and I think the default could be something like put it in the market, because it has always returned over a long time span. But like, to your point, it's like, well, you know, I don't know when your time horizon is, but your time horizon does matter. It matters when you put it in, and it matters when you put it out, or when you take it out, rather. Mark, thank you so much for being on the show, being our first call in.
Ask him where he is and what's going on with his life.
Where are you right now? Give me a picture of what's going on.
I'm in Tbilisi, Georgia.
And why did you choose there? Because I know part of the time of the year you're in Thailand, right?
Mostly I'm in Chiang Mai, and you know, usually every spring we go somewhere. And this year was going to be our, you know, really big year. We had a lot of travel planned. We were going to do. Well, we went to Israel for a little while. We went to Bulgaria for a little while, and we had plans to do all the Balkans, all through Turkey, all through Georgia, all through Albania, all through Armenia, up into Turkestan. Like, we had some plans, and of course, just like everybody else, our plans completely changed, and we just had to think of, where's a good place for us to ride this out? And we chose Georgia, and I've never been here before. We found a great Airbnb at a ridiculously low price. The grocery stores are full. The city seems sane. We're really happy to be here.
That's interesting. I've never been to Georgia. What's the vibe like? You say it's sane, but are people social distancing there?
Yeah, for sure. So everybody, I would say 80% of people are wearing masks. People are definitely social distancing. It is in lockdown, but you can still go out and exercise. You can still go to the store. There's no restaurants open, but plenty of food in the grocery stores, plenty of delivery if you want that. And we're just, there's a nice little hiking trail behind our house here, and I just get some fresh air every day, and I'm just, making the best of it.
Mark, I presume you're there with your wife. Do you guys feel like you're stuck? Do you feel like you're going to have visa problems?
Yeah.
Is that a concern? Have you picked the right place?
We chose Georgia because my wife is a Filipino, and with a U.S. visa, which she has, she can stay in Georgia for 3 months. And so we figured 3 months would be a good enough time for us to, see where we're at in 3 months, right? And also for the world to figure out, how are we going to deal with people stuck in our country when we're locked down? So, I think we're 1 month into it. I think in 2 months we'll have so much more information, and so will everybody else, that I think we made the right decision.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Mark, for calling in and sharing your thoughts on this.
Thanks, Mark.
Okay. Cheers. Bye.
Everybody, that's Mark Brenwall. So a little bit of a backstory. We named an episode after Mark called the Brenwall Code. He has a really impressive approach to consciously approaching his investments in business. You can hear he's very humble relative to his intelligence level, which I guess is a sign of intelligence, maybe.
And his business size as well. He hasn't just been doing well for the past 8 months selling on Amazon.
Good.
He's been doing well for years.
And a lot of people have asked me, what's your favorite Tropical MBA episode? And I always point back to, I think it was back in the 200s. It was the first time Mark was on the show. It was called The Power of Under Optimization. And that, especially when things are going well, there's so many gurus, business people out there who will get on podcasts like this and just talk about hustling and going 100% and raising your prices and optimizing and hiring more people. And I get it. I like all that stuff. I want to be jacked up just as much as the next person. But, Mark had, if I can speak for him, he had been through all that. He had been through a high pressure career. He had maintained a 6-figure salary for many years, and he understood what high dollar clients are all about. And he said, I'd like to start a business that's under optimized. That has margin in it, so that when things go bad, maybe my customers stick around. Maybe that when I'm not that motivated, the business doesn't take a shit, and I think it's enormously powerful and sneaky smart. And I would highly recommend those of you who are looking for a pod, go back and listen to The Power of Under Optimization and the Brenwall Code.
Can I add something else in there? All his desires and wants, and is really just, I want to golf with Dan, my golf buddy, every day.
Hell yeah. Of course, man.
Priorities.
I'll tell you what. I
want to build a business so I can golf every day.
I miss golfing with Mark deeply. It's I don't even want to talk about it. Make me cry. No, I miss the golf course for sure. I mean, that's one thing. Hopefully the golf courses will go back online here pretty soon. One of the things that really jumps out to me, the word that Mark brought up again and again, is time. Really, our brothers and sisters on the fire side, us here in the entrepreneurial community, that's the thing that we're all fighting for. That's the whole point of retiring early, is because you want your time. And I think that is a really fascinating way to consider investments. Is what does my time look like if I get invested? And it's not like in the stock market. One of the wonderful things about the stock market, and I want to be clear, I have a lot of money in the stock market, a lot. So
you're diversified, though.
I'm diversified, but I wouldn't say, put all of your money in the stock market. But one of the great things about that investment is it didn't take me any time. That's one of the best and worst things about it, right? the best thing about something is often the worst thing about it. You can do this with countries and people as well.
In fact, it's so easy that you can go down to one of Edward Jones's 14,000 locations with your pile of money, and you can hand it to him over the desk, and you can say, "Here, do this." It's literally that easy. You can drive to pretty much any shopping center in America, find an Edward Jones, and then just write him a check.
So to Mark's point, I had some extra money that I wasn't able to find investments for, because step number 4 in the entrepreneurial community is starting a small cash flow asset. We all know how hard that is. And so I was like, well, I can't start another business right now. So what I'm going to do is just take this money and put it in the stock market. And it took me 5 minutes to put it in the stock market. And I won't look at it for 5 years. I won't look at it for 15 years. And that's the other time element, is that's really cool. If it is true that, compounding is the 8th wonder of the world or whatever, which I think can be true, then I'll be in really good shape with that investment in 15 or 25 years. And if not a big deal, because my whole retirement plan is diversified.
But to contrast that idea, and this is what we did in 2008, we decided to try our hand at compounding our energy, efforts, and expertise, and we put it into a business. And it returned so well that you and I, basically 2 people, me and you, after 7 years, we have a mini retirement, and we employed 15 people.
Right. And
so
that's the life hack we're advocating fire people to take a look at, is to start taking baby steps towards this new kind of asymmetry. Because there's another thing going on here, which is like the fire people take a big chunk of money and risk it for what is a relatively small return. Whereas here in the entrepreneurial community, Ian and I spent $0 starting a business that returned us both an early retirement within a decade. And that's not like this crazy, strange outcome.
We have a forum full of people that have done similar things.
And we did it by prioritizing our time. We didn't spend our time. We got to talk to these birds about this.
I like it.
We didn't spend our time going to a high paying job or trying to sustain a high paying career. Instead, we risked that career earnings potentially. We were mentioning earlier, I don't know if I could have, like, my soul could have handled 10 years of a high paying job, but I
don't actually know if I was capable of it either. Like,
yeah, that's true.
I mean, the skill set that I have, it translated very well into making products and
you would have had to be
manufacturing.
like a manager or something. Or...
I would have had to not be participating in my skill set. Yeah, I would have had to move into management. And even at that level, like, I don't know. It would have been hard to make $150,000 a year with my skill set. And philosophy, Mr. Philosophy over here. I mean, who's paying you guys $150,000 a year?
You know what? They always joke in the humanities department at Clemson, because I went to this engineering school in the south of the U.S. and the joke was always the engineers receive the checks, the philosophy majors sign them. Like that?
Okay.
We didn't actually believe it at the time.
Yeah, that's what you had to say to get yourself through it.
I think there's something, there's a great virtue somewhere in uselessness, and this idea of something being good in and of itself, and seeing value as an ends, not as a means. And I think that philosophy can in that way be a good training for entrepreneurship. All right, so that's we've said our piece. Mea culpa. Hopefully we were entertaining, though.
Hopefully.
And tell us what you think about this call-in format. There are some technology, man. The complicating issue is that we're sitting next to each other, and a lot of the equipment on Amazon won't come in right away. So we're trying to think if how long we're going to do the Podshop and what would be the way to equip it. It's funny because Skype and Zoom and all this kind of the software-based tools are so good that we would be in much better shape if one of us just went in the house,
yeah,
and one of us stayed in the shop and we just called each other. So I mean, we could even do that. That might have been a decent format for today to buzz somebody else in.
Yeah, if the call-in was good, let us know. I think that it's hard for us to know if the quality was good. So if you guys could hear Mark, that would be helpful information.
We got any comments?
Yeah, Jim Roman says, I know you're cash heavy. Have you shared your current asset allocation? Not sure if you're comfortable post exit, how you invest and how you're investing now. I'd have to write it down. It's in a spread. I have it written down in a spreadsheet. I am comfortable sharing it. I'll just tell you off like the top of my head. I don't know the percentages. I'm invested in real estate. I'm cash heavy. I've got some collector automobiles, and we've got a business. I'm not in the market. Dan's in the market.
Yeah, for me, I should really like look at my portfolio, but it's a lot of index funds, a lot of Bitcoin, and a lot of cash, mostly cash.
And the reason for that, Jim, is I mean, I just bought a property a couple weeks ago, residential property that I'm turning commercial, and this is the time. This is so that I might not be cash heavy by the time all this is over, but I'll tell you what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to be overexposed. I'm not going to be exposed to a situation, if I can control it as much as I can control it, where I don't have movement, basically where I lose my freedom. That is my number one goal with my portfolio, is to continue to have my freedom to do things like this every day, to continue to travel, to continue to work on projects that I want to work on. That is my number one goal with all this, is to make sure that I'm still a free man.
I understand why people would invest 2 decades at a job or retire early, if that's the promise, because the best thing about this lifestyle is like Wednesday mornings. It's funny, we always say Wednesday morning, like being like, you get off that team call and you're like, I'm just going to take a walk now. Like that walk, or I'm going to take a drive down to the cafe. I still remind myself of that all the time. I savor it. I appreciate it. When we lived in San Diego back in the mid-aughts, I just remember just being in such a desperate mental situation because I did not control my life. It seemed like such an absurd thing that had happened to me. Or like, how did I get into this mousetrap where I'm 25 years old, I'm a grown ass man, and like, I don't get to decide if I take a walk at lunch. And that absurdity was very real to me. Like, I was like, I cannot like leave. I cannot go to the next town over at 1 p.m. on a Wednesday. That would be like, I would violate a rule. I would lose my job. And it was partially that absurdity that drove me to step number 4, small business entrepreneurship. I started reading about it online, like Seth Godin, the early 37 Signals stuff, all the early podcasts I was listening to, anything to do with business. I was like the early adopter. I actually got a corporate gift. It was a iPod. And I was like, man, I could put radio on this iPod. And so I started downloading pods. And the idea that, you know, the path to early retirement would somehow be like existing in those sorts of jobs, you know, wasn't tenable to me. So I can understand, like, a lot of people in the FIRE movement, I can really get down with, is a lot of people love their jobs. And I really respect that, you know. It just was never quite the case for me, in terms of like I had like some good sprints, but I never had something where it's like, man, I'm like this kind of engineer and I dig it. Like, I work on making sailboats better. And that's what we do. And that's the kind of jobs that we try to create at our company, is like jobs that every single person on our team, there's a big part of me that would enjoy doing their job. Because at some point we probably have done it. Yeah. And it's what we think's cool. And we treat them the way that, like, when one of our staff members calls us up and says, I got a toothache, my favorite thing to do is like, go to the dentist.
Why are you calling me?
You don't have
Get
to
out
take
of
a
here.
vacation day. Just go to the dentist. I love that shit, because that's what I wanted. I wanted to go to the dentist because that's a fundamental human right, to go to the dentist.
To get your hair cut too.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for the comments. Keep it in the garage. Low tech, but minimal risk of tech failure. Colin was simple and clear. Was able to hear Mark well. Colin format was great. Thank you guys so much for joining us again on this podcast, and we will see you tomorrow. Same bad time.